Welcome, everyone. Welcome. This is Dog Life Radio, episode 31 coming at you. And I am your host, Rossi Giugio. Welcome. All are welcome. It's good to see you again. We took a small pause here, but we are back with a very cool episode for you coming up. Super cool, if I were to say so myself, and I do. You may notice that my voice does not sound as sparkling as it usually does. I am on the mend, so to speak. Been on on recovery mode for a little while. Lost my voice for quite a few days, so I'm coming back trying to get this one teed up and ready for you. But this week we have for you a great conversation I'm having with Scott Reid, two-time Britain Strongest Man in the 105 kilogram. That would be about 231 pound category. That and much more. He's not just your typical strongman, and you will hear that once we get into that conversation. But I do not want to let the cat out of the bag too early. We've got a lot packed into this one. So we're going to take a moment here. We're going to pay a couple of bills, do a little pause for the cause, so to speak. But when we jump back in, we are going to get into the podcast you should be listening to, and then on to my talk with Scott Reid. How's that sound for you? Hey gang, remember, life is too short for crappy coffee. Check out Death Wish Coffee at deathwishcoffee.com. They have got two signature blends. Their Odin Force blend, or Valhalla Java, is a smoother, more mild roast. And for those of you like myself who like a stronger, bolder flavored coffee, check out the flagship, Death Wish Coffee. Fantastic stuff. You're going to love it. It is the world's strongest coffee.
Whoa, how did we get on this podcast?
I'm not sure, but I like it here.
It's pretty great, but we should probably tell everyone about our own podcast, Fueled by Deathcast.
Hell yeah. Comes out every Thursday from the Death Wish Coffee Company, the world's strongest coffee.
Every week you can hear me, the Incredible Jeff.
And me, the amazing D-Man.
And we talk about new science discoveries, breaking news from Death Wish Coffee, and we welcome a special guest from rock stars to astronauts and ask them all the question, what fuels you?
The podcast is available right on deathwishcoffee.com and wherever podcasts are found, including iTunes, Google Music, Stitcher, and more.
Plus, you can now watch it live on the Death Wish Coffee Company page on Facebook and watch all our videos over on YouTube.
All right. Now you know all about Fueled by Deathcast and how you can listen to it.
But first, let's finish this podcast.
Let's get back to the show.
If you care about your skin, you should be using Evans Country Clean products. This soap is going to heal, restore, and rehydrate your skin. It's made out of all natural ingredients, and it is hypoallergenic and great for people with sensitive skin. They've got a scent for everyone, including a whole line of products just for men. Listen up. Now, not only is this a top-notch product, but you can also get 15% off by using Dog Life 15. That is DOGLIFE15 for 15% off when you go to evanscountryclean.com. Check it out. And we're back. All right. So let's jump right into the podcast you should be listening to and why. This week I've got two for you. One of them kind of almost goes without saying, but it's a Joe Rogan. I love Joe Rogan's podcast. This one is the, Joe Rogan Experience, the MMA one, episode 22 with Bas Rutten. Why? Bas's insights on MMA are phenomenal, as always, and to be expected. But it's more than that. He is a hilarious and entertaining guy. Even if you're not into MMA, I definitely think it's worth a listen to. But I'm always on the lookout for shows with Bas just because he's quite the character. You can check him out on Kevin James' sitcom, Kevin Can Wait also. He's playing a Dutchman named Rutger on there. Kind of a stretch, I guess, from playing a Dutchman named Bas in real life. Anyway, next one, Shrugged Collective. This used to be Barbell Shrugged. They've kind of changed into more of a network podcast. Shrugged Collective is the title. Episode 309. They've got John Cena on there. Hustle, loyalty, respect. Again, you don't necessarily have to be a WWE or a wrestling fan to enjoy it. It's just it's an interesting conversation. It's kind of cool to hear him. For those of you from the Northeast, knowing that John did go to school up here at Springfield College in Massachusetts. Nice to see a local guy, or at least a local to college anyway, doing so well. So those are the 2 podcasts you should be listening to. And I just told you why. All right. Now, before we jump into the formal show with my conversation with Scott Reid, we are going to just remind y'all that I'm a part of Six Squirrel Studios, production company. Check them out on their website, sixsquirrelstudio.com. All of your podcast production needs can be fulfilled there. And let's see, before we wrap up, the last thing I want to remind you guys of is thank you so much for supporting the show. Remember to follow me on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, all that stuff on that Dog Life Radio. And remember to drop me some likes if you're in iTunes. Follow, subscribe the podcast. It's the best way for this show to get to new listeners. And with that, I will turn it over to my conversation with Scott. Enjoy, folks.
All right, we are rolling, and this is Rossi Giugio, Dog Life Radio, live with Scott Reid, 2-time Britain's strongest man in the 105 kilogram category. And you know what? One of the things I forgot to do, Scott, was convert that. What is that, about 215, 220 in pounds?
Oh, no, it's more than that. 105's 230 something, I think. 102 right. Would be 225, so it's over 230, 232 or something like that, I think it is.
All right.
Yeah, roughly.
Very cool. Well, about 230 for my American listeners, but 105 kilograms for everybody over there in Europe, the UK, and do have let's see, in Australia and in Italy too. Got some strongmen listeners all over the place.
Well, I could really confuse you because over here we use stone as well, so it's 16 and a half stone. But Americans are like, what are you talking about? What's a stone?
I love that. I love hearing that. Well, he's coming in at about 12 stone, and that goes back to when I used to love watching World's Strongest Man in old school, back with Magnus Samuelsson, even further back with Magnus Magnuson. All of those guys, I would watch them, and they'd always do it. It's all in stones, and I loved it. I think primarily for the European audience.
Pounds are, I find it quite hard to relate pounds to how big a guy is. It's easier now because of social media. It's become more mainstream. But if someone says to me, a 20 stone man, I know that's a really big guy, but then that would be probably like a 300 pound guy to you. Does that make sense of my so it's hard to me to relate to it. We've always used stone over here, and boxing still uses stone, doesn't it? Boxing does, boxing's in stone. So
it definitely makes it confusing. It's funny because you've got people who are passionate about either powerlifting, weightlifting, or strongman. In their head, they know the kilograms. They know the conversions really quickly, and they could and some of the strongmen can even get the stone conversions. But others, just kind of like your more common or passerby audience, they kind of get lost. The kilograms, I generally use a rule of it's like you double it and then a little bit more. So like a little bit over a double.
It's 2.22, but 2.2 you get it. So 2.22 is exact, but 2.2, so 100 kilos is 220 pounds. So a guy at, say, 224 would 225 would be a 16 stone guy in Europe, 16 stone man.
Well, there you go. We started off with a little bit of a math lesson.
yeah, just a little bit.
Yeah, cool. Well, Scott, thank you so much for taking time to join me. I was really, really looking forward to having a conversation with you, not only because of your involvement in strongman athletics and competition, but the work that you're doing with Focus Performance, Stand Up and Fight. To me, it is extremely interesting, very timely, I think, in general in the world of fitness. So thank you so much for joining.
Well, no, it's my pleasure. I love what you're doing. I love the format of your podcast, and you've had some really good guests on, so it's a pleasure for me to be a guest.
That's great. That's awesome. So I really appreciate it. And let's jump into why I got so interested in what was happening with Focus Performance. So just for those of you who don't know, Focus Performance, the group, you've got a couple of partners that you're working with to put together. Really solid supplements and it's more than supplements. It's really all about putting together sports nutrition and getting people to move in the right direction away from, I guess, back in the 90s and maybe the early 2000s, you still had all of this large processed food and supplements, where now this is really aiming at giving quality ingredients, quality things for overall body and mind performance. That's like a nice little intro.
Yeah, you kind of nailed it there. It came about because I studied with Paul Chek. People in the States that are in the fitness industry will know of Paul Chek. He's like the grandfather of ancestral eating and functional movement, really.
Yep.
So I was struggling with supplement brands, finding ones that I could trust, especially in the UK. And it was, I thought, I've had enough. I'm just going to start my own brand. Then I know where everything's sourced from. I know that there's no fillers and unnecessary ingredients in there. I know where the whey protein comes from. I know it's organic and not full of hormones. And that's how it all started, really, just from there. Building like an educational platform so people can learn about real food first. And then if they choose to, they can choose to optimise themselves by adding in the supplements that we've created, to improve themselves as athletes, really.
And when I was saying before about it being very timely, what I mean is in the, I don't know, maybe it's the last 5-10 years or so. 10 might be a stretch, but this huge shift towards really truly understanding what is in your foods, the organic boom, and then, kind of a little snapback on it where, you're really trying to understand what organic means, the hormones. I love the piece on your site, your website, where it's kind of talking about crap fillers that read like Japanese video instructions. It's hilarious because when you read the instructions on or the ingredients on what's in your food or a supplement, shouldn't you be able to understand what is going in there?
Well, absolutely, and this is an issue. The deeper I've delved into the supplements industry, the more, our grass-fed whey, for instance, it's got 4 ingredients. That's it. Well, 4 ingredients. It's got the whey protein, whichever natural flavouring it needs to make strawberry, chocolate, or vanilla. Stevia as a sweetener, so it's a completely natural 0-calorie sweetener that's very favourable on the glycemic index. You don't really get a spike. And xanthan gum, which is a thickening agent, but it also has a positive effect on the microbiome of the stomach. There's like 4 ingredients. You'll see 20 on most brands, and you're looking through it, and I'm like, why the hell do they need soy lecithin in there? And if they were really conscientious, they'd actually use sunflower lecithin instead of soy lecithin. But it's like they've got emulsifiers, flow agents in there, 4 different types of sweetener, X, Y, Z. It's just not needed to make the product. And a lot of it's to make it so they can make it in massive quantities and get it through the machines. Some of it's to give it that McDonald's milkshake flavour that some people still kind of want. But you don't need to have all of these poor ingredients that have a detrimental effect on the body in these products to make it a good tasting quality product.
Absolutely. Sometimes I'll find some of these ingredients, they put them on there absolutely for the mass, bulk production lines. I also like to keep them so that you can order this enormous amount of whatever the product is and keep it for months. So you've got like this stuff that's preservatives that's going to keep whatever the product is. You can keep it on your shelf in your pantry or on your cupboard for months and months, and it won't go bad. And you're thinking, and then I think, well, should I have something that I can eat in my cabinet for 3, 4, 5 months, or should I buy a smaller size, keeping it a little bit fresher without having all that preservatives?
It is that, isn't it? It's about real food. Obviously, organic and farm to table is like the gold standard, but initially, you really just want to get people to cut out sugared fizzy beverages, processed foods. Like normal shelf-bought, bread, white bread, and go more over to like real vegetables, like fresh vegetables, real meats, real butter, coconut oil, sourdough bread from the bakery down the road, that if you were to eat it a day and a half later, it's like a brick and you could hammer a nail in with it. But that's actually a real food, as opposed to the bread you buy from the supermarket that even when it's 6 weeks out of date, it still hasn't got mould on it and you could eat it, you know. It's just educating people, and from there you can plug the gaps,
Yeah, that's a sign right there. If the bread is still good after a few weeks, after like 3 weeks, that's a sign that you probably shouldn't be eating it. I can't stand looking at buying a loaf of bread in the supermarket and seeing that one of the main ingredients is sugar. That just drives me up a wall.
Yeah, that's the good old you've got the food scientists out there that have worked out what makes our buttons click, you know. But they don't know how to press our buttons when it comes to appetite, and that off switch doesn't go on. So sweet with salt, they suddenly worked out salted caramel. I mean, everyone loves salted caramel, but that's because your neurochemistry doesn't have a clue what's going on, and it turns off that off switch. You can just keep eating and eating and eating. They're very clever, but I don't think it's morally correct what they're allowed to do, really. But that's a deep story, I suppose, when you go back into the food pyramid and where it actually came from. And the actual lady that formulated the original food pyramid was struck off because she said you should be mainly eating vegetables, good clean cuts of meat, fats. It was like the opposite way to the pyramid they made, because their farming techniques couldn't sustain the actual food pyramid that was said to be healthy. So they spun it round and said you need 5 to 8 servings of grains a day, this, that, and the other, and it was on its head. And that's what's led to all of the the Western diet ailments, all of the acute disease that we've got these days, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that kind of thing, I think you hit it right on the head there. I remember seeing a documentary about the corn industry in the United States, and you nailed it. There were like, I think it was like 6 to 9 different types of corn that were being farmed going far enough back. And over time, the corn got smaller and smaller, the different varieties, because they tended to go toward the variety that could be produced in the highest quantity in the smallest amount of space in the fastest amount of time. And, of course, it had the lowest amount of nutritional value in it. And then all of a sudden you see the government is allowing, for the overproduction of corn, as opposed to, at least in the United States, there was a point in time, I think it was in the early 60s, where they would they would pay farmers to only supply a certain amount to allow for a certain balance of corn and, the balanced diets. And then all of a sudden, I forgot who was the head of the organization, but they allowed for the overproduction, and then all of a sudden corn is in everything, and it's this crap food that's got nothing of value when you eat it, and it's just horrible state to be in.
Yeah, the USA is a very different sort of landscape to Europe and the UK when it comes to food. Stuff that they get away with over their food companies, they just can't get away with in Europe. And it's by no means perfect. We've still got a long way to go over here. But like high fructose corn syrup is literally in everything. Any processed food you guys have got over there, it's got high fructose corn syrup in it. And you're right, they put corn in everything as like a filler or a bulker in ready meals and stuff like that. Where did this even come from? You're
absolutely right.
State of affairs, really. Yeah.
Well, no, you're absolutely right.
The pesticides. Yeah. Sorry, carry on.
No, go ahead. The pesticides you're saying.
Yeah, well, you're saying when they changed from more ancestral, lower yield versions of corn, the corn that they brought in to farm, it wasn't naturally resilient to the pests that would attack it. So that's where Roundup and stuff came in as well, and you got DDT that then converts in the soil over 20 years to some other type of toxin. And when you go back to like more ancestral, lower yield forms of grain, they actually have like a natural immunity to pests, and you don't need to use. That's why organic farming is much lower yield, but the food's actually nutrient dense and good for you. And the more we try and mass farm on on the mass factory farming levels and the varieties of food they use, it's just causing huge systemic problems within the food industry, health, everything really.
Absolutely. I mean, there's tons of connections between those pieces and the state of the United States overall health, the amount of obesity. It's hilarious when you had a blog on your site about coconut oil, and it was kind of tying to the American Heart Association. Not too recent now, but recent when you posted the blog. Their advisory about how coconut oil is awful. You should really stick to a nice, healthy oil like vegetable oil. And it was a good write-up. For those of you who are listening, you should check it out on focusperformance.co.uk is the site, and go to the blog. A lot of really good info about coconut oil and the American Heart Association, and that's the tie in the States where you just have so many large companies in bed together, and you just know it, they're up to no good.
Yeah, they are really. Weren't they trying to say that palm oil was good for you? Because and then it turned out that one of the guys that sits on the board of the American Heart Association is actually like a chairman of the palm oil board or something ridiculous like that. They all got blown out the water, and the science they were using was just, anyone. They were picking on a couple of studies that were 25 years old to reference their article to, so that it had studies backing it up, but they completely ignored the hundreds of articles and double-blind placebo studies and peer-reviewed studies that have been done since then, saying that saturated fat isn't bad and coconut oil isn't bad, and coconut oil is actually shown to lower small dense LDL but up the amount of large fluffy LDL. So people look at LDL cholesterol as all bad, but it's not, because there are two different types, and the larger stuff shuttles away the small dense LDL and allows you to transport it out of the body. But yeah, very selective with the studies they used, and the scientists they used kind of got buried there, and they went quiet after that for a little bit, I think, because they got attacked from all angles after that article.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. A lot of dirt came up where those original studies that you're referencing that were like 25 years old, they were studies that that were shown that the scientists were actually paid money to come up with the findings to really hammer cholesterol as being bad. So eggs, the egg yolks, and that they wanted to prime that as being very bad for you. And bacon and eggs is a prime breakfast meal. Got bashed because of the cholesterol. So then, if you can't eat bacon and eggs or sausage and eggs, what are you going to eat for breakfast? You're going to have breakfast cereal, which was where a lot of the sugar industry was in cahoots. I mean, they were part of it, and that was those two original studies actually stem back to that. I remember reading an article in the New York Times not too long ago about that. It was shocking, absolutely shocking.
Yeah, I think the way they did it was they kind of, look at France. Well, that's just an anomaly. Well, hang on a minute. They eat huge amounts of saturated fat, cheese, raw dairy, loads of red wine, and they have one of the lowest instances of heart disease in the world. And they go, that's just an anomaly. And what they do is they'd say, say with the American diet, that they wouldn't, say for instance, yourself, you eat like really good grass-fed beef, you're eating real butter, vegetables, everything. They would say, well, red meat's bad for you and saturated fat, that's bad for you. But all of the people they used on the study, they didn't put into context what the rest of their diet was. So the red meat could have been people that are eating McDonald's burgers all day, and the saturated fat would obviously come from those McDonald's burgers as well. And they also drink 2 litres of Coca-Cola a day, etc. So they don't put anything into context. There's not a control, and then they can say it's correct, but when you know how to you look into the actual small print of the studies, you're like, this is ridiculous. It's not even a study. But the masses don't know how to look, and the government counts on that. They count on people not knowing what they're looking at, which is wrong, really.
Absolutely, and up until the recent time, whatever amount of years you want to say, a lot of the information, the government and these large companies, which, I did a little bit of research on the American Heart Association, and the major corporate contributors to the American Heart Association are these large cereal and mass food production companies, as well as a lot of the big pharmacy companies that produce all of the drugs that are prescribed for all of the inflammation and long-term diseases that are associated with these things. I mean, all of that information really was not available before. Where hopefully with, all of the podcasts, hopefully mine can play a part of it, but there's so many out there that are pointing these things out, and people can do some research on their own, and hopefully it becomes a little bit more apparent where we can have a little bit more accountability in having that farm-to-table process, getting more foods that are, hopefully within a small vicinity of where you're living, which ideally, can kind of point to a little bit healthier product.
I mean, yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, politics has kind of had such an influence on the foods we can eat, the foods we can eat, the plants we can use over the last century or slightly longer. I mean, the perfect example is obviously cannabis has been illegal forever in the States, and that was because of William Randolph Hearst being terrified of hemp being a superior product when it comes to making paper, clothing, textiles, everything really. So that stems from there. But now you've got, it's supposed to be bad. It was a Schedule 1 drug in the States, although it's starting to be legalised. But now you've got GlaxoSmithKline, one of the biggest pharmaceutical companies on the planet, are trying to patent CBD. They're trying to actually patent it because of all of its anti-inflammatory benefits and its cancer-fighting properties. They've known for a long time that it completely blows a lot of their drugs out of the water, but it's a plant, so they couldn't patent it. They are doing everything they possibly can to stop small companies being able to make high-quality products that can be distributed to the masses and help with post-traumatic stress, cancer treatment, insomnia, anything like that. But because they want to patent it, make a drug that they can sell to billions of dollars to the government and then stop you getting it. It's criminal.
It really is criminal. That's completely, to use the phrase you said before, the morality is just highly suspect. I mean, the fact that you can use this plant for so much that, I mean, forget about the amount of usage in the sports, the professional sports, or even non-professional sports, people using it to assist with recovery from inflammation and whatnot, but all of the serious benefits to all of the things that you were mentioning. I mean, I've even heard it's also beneficial in, when you're having, I think it was with children who were having attacks where they were lost the word. Medication-resistant seizures in kids. It stops them. The kids can go from having 10 seizures a day to 1 a month through using CBD, high-dose CBD. And there's no psychoactive side to CBD at all, to cannabidiol. Obviously, THC, the female plant, has its uses as well. But it's criminal, and they will continue to try and give it bad press, the pharmaceutical companies, until they can lock it down and own the rights to it, and then they go, oh, actually, all of these years, it's had all of these benefits. It can do this for you. It can do that for you. You don't need ibuprofen. You don't need this. You don't need that. You don't need Xanax. You don't need sleeping tablets. This can cover all of these bases. But then they'll tell you that, and all the research will come out about how good it is and how good it is at helping inflammation with the brain after traumatic brain injuries and stuff. But at the moment, it all just gets swept under the carpet. Yeah. So, do you use CBD as recovery from with your training?
Yeah, I use I use CBD from a company in the UK called Love Hemp, and or it's Love CBD, sorry. And I would do it with like a magnesium bath. So I'd take a magnesium bath and some CBD if I've had a particularly hard week of training. It definitely works.
Awesome. So I know we were talking, I feel like we could probably go for another hour or two about all this. I don't even want to call it.
I'll just like... No. I'd just like to make a point. So obviously you're interviewing someone who most people probably would expect, I would like, he's got a meathead on today. You've got like 2 times Britain's strongest man, coaches MMA fighters, does this, does that, trains in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. But I would hope from the conversation we've had so far, people would really kind of start to recognise that my company, Focus Performance, as a nutrition brand, and I myself come from a very different place than just like your mainstream sports nutrition, throw products out the door as fast as possible. It's the conversation we've had so far should kind of underline that, I think, really.
Yeah, and I hope so, because everything that we're saying, I think, is things that they can go out, people can go out and research, and they can go out and take a look at it. I want them to go and take a look at your website, definitely. I find the information that's there is fascinating. It's really interesting. But at the end of the day, whether they are taking a product from your site or from another site, or as long as they're taking a bit of control over your own life, and what you're putting in your body, that's the most important piece. That they're actually taking that, they're standing up and doing it.
Absolutely. I mean, you mentioned this in your interview with Christmas Abbott the other day, that supplements are supplements. So even if you've got bad supplements like Creapure, creatine monohydrate, it's just creatine monohydrate. Just make sure you buy one that's not had 7 grams of sugar added to it per serving, Protein, to a certain extent, whey protein is whey protein. And if you're using it as a supplement in and around your training, your body's going to absorb a lot of the sugars and stuff that are added to it. So it's more about real food. You need to make sure you can't fix a bad diet with supplements, and you can't fix a terrible diet with just average training. You need to get the food right. You need to get the training right. So eating real unprocessed food and drinking plenty of water and cutting fizzy drinks out will get you 90% of the way there. And then you add in selected supplements where you need them. And obviously athletes that are training 2-a-days and really pushing the boundaries, if they need to optimize themselves, they 100% need supplements. But your average person, right up to your high intermediate, it's kind of here or there. They should be used as supplements just to plug little holes here or there.
Yeah, well, that's it exactly. Plug-in holes. Like when I think of supplements for the common person, the common woman, the common man, I think about some basic things. I think about a multivitamin. Why? Because I'm thinking in my circle of people that I actually come in physical contact with through day-to-day life, do they have the opportunity to eat a completely well-rounded diet and get all of their vitamins and minerals? Sure. But do they? Maybe not every single day. Life gets in the way. Stuff happens where you're running around. Before we started the recording, we were talking about, kids and family balance. And sometimes you may be running around and you might not be able to get all of it. So I think of starting with something simple and basic like a multi, but getting into like the pieces of getting creatine and really getting all of these other types of supplements, like you said, and not completely necessary for everybody. People need to use their own judgment as far as where they are, but I think of the food that we're putting in our bodies is the foundation, and if we're not doing that appropriately, then it doesn't matter how many pills or powders or whatever, how many shakes you take, it's not going to do anything.
Oh, absolutely. I think the first two supplements in inverted commas on your shelf should be a really high quality multivitamin, preferably one from Whole Foods, and a really good clean fish oil. From there, you're covering so many bases. And people that train really don't know how effective high-dose fish oil is. Has an anabolic effect. It helps with eyesight, helps with brain function, helps with joint health, but it actually helps build muscle as well. There's a lot to just those two very simple supplements. The one with fish oil, it does have to be high quality. So from the correctly sourced small fish that aren't eating loads of other fish, so it's not high in heavy metals, and it needs to be stored in the fridge. But apart from that, they're the two things you get on your shelf first, and then you can add in selected supplements from there. But I these days tend to go more with like we've got a product called Hemp Pro, which is a mixture of like 80% hemp protein and a smaller amount of rice protein isolate. I use that more because I find I digest it better. Hemp has got double the bioavailability of whey protein as well. You've got the added essential fatty acids in there, fibre. So I prefer that to whey protein these days, but it's horses for courses, really. Whatever your body reacts to optimally, that's what you should use.
Yeah, that's actually the thing that I've been hearing a lot more recently in the past couple of months about everything in general. When we're talking about these appropriate diets, where it's the whole foods, natural ingredients, the supplements in the same type of vein, but also knowing you have to take some time and spend some time listening to your body and how things are reacting and how things are digesting, how things are performing, because not every one thing, it's not a one size fits all. It's funny because you see these pieces where I'll talk to people and they'll say, I'm going down the paleo diet because I want to lose some extra body fat, move in that direction. And I'd say, okay, well, what are you doing? And I'm cutting out sugar, no more refined sugar. And I'm thinking in my head, you shouldn't do that anyway. I mean, you should have been doing that anyway. You shouldn't. When you start talking about Coca-Colas and having sodas, man, to me, when I think about somebody drinking a soda, I think about somebody smoking, where it's like, we know how bad it is. How can we keep doing this now?
Well, no, I don't know if I can say this because it's I'm not fat shaming, but nothing makes me more angry than someone that's clinically obese, sitting in a restaurant, eating a double-sized dessert, who's drinking a glass of Coke. I'm like, don't you know what you're doing to yourself? You're costing the health system hundreds of thousands of pounds. You're killing yourself. But a lot of it's through education. Like, their parents haven't educated them. They just think it's normal. And then what happens is your epigenetics change. So, a few generations ago, they might have come from a fit family, but then gradually it fell to the wayside. And you do pass those genes on to your kids. So you need to be really careful in the choices you make, because if you're really unhealthy, you will pass those epigenetics onto your children, and they'll be predisposed to type 2 diabetes, Alzheimer's, heart disease, to put on weight and food addiction. So it's not just you're thinking about. You've got to think about future generations. And I'm not a Jedi Knight. I'm not 100% good all the time. But I believe very much in the 80-20 rule, where you should have your days off. You should be able to go out for a meal. And when you go out for that meal, you're out for that meal. You eat what you want when you're out for that meal. But when you're away from that's what your normality is, the real wholesome, well-sourced food, clean vegetables, good meats. At that meal, that's like the exception, not the norm. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I think that's very important to have that type of a balance, because it's to me, it helps prevent those big breakdowns and setbacks where, absolutely, you should be able to go out on your Instagram. I saw a Guinness, probably one of my favorite beers to have. I like to have one every once in a while. Yeah, but you're not, sitting down every night drinking 6 Guinness. I mean, you can't expect to have positive results with that. And you nailed it on the education piece, because you think about maybe 2 to 3 generations ago, smoking was not known to be bad. So, of course, people were smoking. They didn't think it was bad. And with the sodas and stuff now, I think of it twofold. I think of it with the education, where there's definitely a populace out there that are not aware that it's really that bad for you, or they don't believe it. And then the other piece is, I think there's just a huge addictive quality to some of these foods, where they just make you, you want more. Like, you have a sip of it and you have to drink the whole 2 liters, And it's the same thing with juice with our kids. Like juice boxes, bottles of apple juice, or whatever, where I see kids just pounding juice. And I remember reading just different articles about how juice really doesn't have anything for your kid. There's nothing of value to it. And it's painting with a broad brush, because I know there are different juice brands and things out there.
I think the brand thing is kind of going away from it, really. Any shop bought juice is just sugar water, really. So it's exactly the same as drinking a can of Coke, just without the preservatives. The caveat there is freshly squeezed juice. You do still get all the vitamins, fibre, and everything from that juice. But within 5 minutes, it's all oxidised. So it's useless. Like, what they'll state on these juices is it's got X amount of vitamin C in, or X amount of this, X amount of that. But that was what was contained in the juice the second it was squeezed. Within 5 minutes, it's gone. It's oxidised. So it literally is sugar water. It's like my kids will have some. The only fizzy drink we have in the house is fizzy water. They love fizzy water, but it would be like we'd put a little bit of juice in fizzy water, so they think they're getting fizzy orange, but it's a tiny bit of fresh juice in fizzy water, and that they think that's a treat now. They're happy to drink water most of the time, but if they say, "Oh, can we have fizzy orange?" that's what they get. So it's definitely not like Fanta or it's just their taste buds become used to what you give them, and things taste sweeter. Bitters taste a bit more bitter. All the flavours are more pronounced when you do cut sugar out for even a couple of weeks. You're really surprised how different flavours are to you.
Absolutely, that goes double for adult type things as well, not just with the juice. But yeah, I did the exact same thing with my kids, where now it's all about getting fancy water bottles for them, and that kind of makes it a little bit more fun for drinking the water. But I'm a big coffee drinker. I love coffee in the morning, and I like making sure I've got high quality coffee from organic and
from Death Wish coffee.
Yeah, I love their stuff. And it's fair trade, and I don't put anything in it. No sugar, no sweeteners. I drink it black because I like the taste of it. And when you're putting in all of these sweeteners, and when you go overboard, in my opinion, that's when you lose it. And you could do the same thing with other drinks as well. All that other sugar, and the same thing with the foods too.
Yeah, I mean, my youngest son is 5 now, but he will only eat steak at the moment, so it's not a bad thing. But he mainly lives on steak and raspberries. That's what his main diet is at the moment. But I'd rather it be that than him be addicted to pizza or Pop-Tarts. He's an expensive child at the moment.
That's it's funny because when you think about spending money on food, and you go out and you're thinking, oh, I could buy a couple of boxes of Pop-Tarts versus having to buy some containers of raspberries and some steak. It's going to cost you a bit more money, but it's one of those things that down the road it's definitely worth it, and hopefully people can realize it. Spending money on their kids sometimes makes it a little easier, but they also need to make sure they're doing it for themselves.
Yeah, I believe that's true. It's kind of practice what you preach as well. Don't sit there eating a chocolate bar and a packet of crisps and then say to your children, "No, it's not good to eat this." Don't do what I do. Do what I say. You need to lead by example, and that follows in when you coach people with exercise. With every facet of life, really. If you're going to talk the talk, you've got to walk the walk as well.
Absolutely. Hey, let's shift gears a little bit to training. We've mentioned a couple of times about being UK Strongest Man. I've had a couple of strong men on before, spoke to a couple of others, and it's funny because I think even with strongman training is permeating into mainstream as well. It's an extremely popular sport overseas. In the States, it's becoming more popular as well. But I think the piece of it that's becoming huge is the different types of training implements that are being added to, I'll call them more global gyms, regular gyms like farmers' carries and yokes and logs and so forth, where it's just something different. It's more functional and it feels different, like strongman for everybody.
Yeah, strongman for everybody is a really good concept. The movements we would do with ridiculous weights are actually hugely functional, effective exercises that mimic like primal pattern movements that our ancestors would have done. Like carrying stuff, lifting stuff in the correct way. Like Atlas stone is how you would actually lift a rock off the ground. Carrying stuff on your back, lifting logs. The Conan's wheel and stuff like that. It's lighter weights. It's an amazing way to train. The weights we had to kind of acclimatise ourselves to and gradually build up to compete at the highest level were definitely not good for you and definitely not heavy. But lighter loads used functionally, I love it as a training method. You can really take someone's sort of physique, power and strength to the next level just by implementing a few sort of sub-maximal strongman movements into their training.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. It's funny because I love one of my favorites is the Husserfeld stone. It's just one of my favorite exercises. I saw your comment. You had a chance. You actually
I saw Sven. Yeah, with Sven. I've competed in Norway a few times, and he's been there every time. But the first time I hadn't been doing strongman very young, and Sven was still competing. He was still trying to beat Zydrunas Savickas at the Arnold Classic. So he was in training for that at the time. He was 150 kilos. So what's that in? I don't even know what that is. Times that by 2.2. So like 360 pounds. Like a very big guy, like a huge guy.
Yeah, huge.
6'5", hands like dinner plates. And it was like you dragged a Viking from some sort of fantasy book, and he was sitting at the table opposite me. And I'm sitting there texting my friends, going, "I'm having dinner with Sven Carlson. I can't believe it." Type thing. It was he won Britain's world's strongest man a couple of years before that. Larger than life character. It was good to meet him, but it kind of brought things into perspective as well, with why I wanted to do strongman and the kind of history behind it. It actually started in Scotland. The stones did. They were called manhood stones, and they would load them onto fence posts. And the strongest man in the village was the one that could load the biggest stone onto the fence post. It was that's where the Highland Games sort of started from as well.
See, now to me, like when I think about the Olympics, we just kind of wrapped up with this recent round of the Olympics, and I started thinking about the events that are in there, and it drives me nuts, the different events that are in there. I think it's a bunch of garbage for the most part, and not that it doesn't take skill and talent to do these, but they're not necessarily sports. When I think about what you were just describing, I feel like there's different events, if you will, in strongman that should probably be part of the Olympics, because they go back to the beginning of time in terms of how people would test who the strongest was, lifting a rock up over your head, loading it to a fence post, whatever it may be, where I feel like there's more ties and direct roots to the beginnings. Like running, to me that's one of them. It's like, who can run the fastest? Boom, that makes sense to me. Lifting a stone or whatever we want to do for it, like the deadlift. Who can pick up the weight off the ground the most? There's no denying it, and it seems very direct. Yeah, I love that.
It's a hard one, really. Olympic athletes are so advanced these days, but there's a lot to be said for strongman training, and how it builds sort of raw real world strength. So you would always get the farmer's lad that doesn't look strong at all, but he's like freakishly strong. He's been chopping wood since he was a kid. He's been lifting up the trailers to stick on tractors and plows. He's in the real world he's really strong. And what we'd find is you would get champion powerlifters, that world record holders would try and come over to strongman, and they'd always be like dissing strongman. Oh, we're stronger than this. We're strong. Well, come and have a go then. They would never win, ever win. There was powerlifters I competed against all the time that were phenomenally strong at the three main lifts: squat, bench, and deadlift. They would never beat me in a strongman competition, so they couldn't move with any weight. As soon as they did, they'd pull a muscle or rip a muscle, or it was the wrong angle, so they couldn't carry the weight. They were used to lifting up and down in a straight line, which you need to be a student of that game. You need to have those skills, and you need to be elite at those events. But they don't necessarily transfer directly into strongman unless you've been putting in the work to be functional from the beginning of your training. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. It goes, most people getting into exercising, at least back when I was younger, was they wanted to look good, and they were bench pressing, and just like you said, it's these static movements that, you can become very strong, and there's no denying it. But if you're out in the yard or in the garage and you need to move something that's heavy, picking up a bundle of shingles for a roof or whatever it may be, you're more apt. I'm not saying you're going to get hurt if you don't train strongman, but there's all those transitional muscle groups and tendons, and the grip it takes to deadlift is you got to have a good grip. But the grip it takes to actually lift stones and move these oddly shaped implements, that's real grip strength. And that's a huge difference.
Oh, it is, yeah.
So I think it's more transferable to everyday life. You know, you're not going to hurt your back. You know, you could deadlift 500 pounds, 600 pounds, or, you know, whatever, a great deal for a normal person, but then, you know, hurt yourself because you're, you know, lifting in a slightly off manner. It's not the normal sumo or conventional lift because your body's not used to it.
No, it's not. You need to make that kind of a cornerstone, a foundation of your training from the beginning, and make sure you keep that mobility and flexibility as you move forward. Don't neglect it. So I was always very conscious of that when I trained strongman. So I always managed to maintain quickness across the floor and kind of athleticism that other athletes didn't, that just concentrated on static strength all the time. And I think that's very important, because then that transferred to me to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and mixed martial arts, you know, later on. It was very transferable, applicable, like explosive power, which you don't necessarily get from just training in the gym. Now, I'm a meathead. I love normal gym training as well, like bench press, deadlift, squats. The squat rack is like a temple for me. A lot of stuff gets worked out in that squat rack, but
yeah,
it's you do need the functional movement with it. Otherwise, it's very limiting.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's funny. I went a similar path where I was competing in powerlifting for a while, and I was doing pretty well for myself. And then after that, I transitioned into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as well. And I was thinking, you know, I'm a strong guy. I'm stronger than the average normal, you know, person walking down the street. I'm not, you know, nothing, you know, I'm not like a world class or anything. There's a strong guy. But you go in there and you're using completely different muscles. Like I can squat, you know, whatever amount of weight, but then my legs are getting gassed with all the different moves and trying to get people in and out of guard and sweeps, and because you're just using things so differently. And it's thinking, powerlifting's awesome. It's a great sport, and I love doing those things. But wow, telling you know, once you step outside the rack, you're using everything differently.
Yeah, I absolutely admire the top powerlifters. It's an amazing sport, but then again, I feel it's very, very incomplete as a sport compared to strongman. And like we were talking about grappling, pure Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in a gi, it's a very, very funny sport. Like, strength doesn't necessarily mean a huge amount in that sport, but then grappling for MMA, where you're no-gi and there's strikes involved and you start from standing a lot of the time and you can like slam people and the takedowns are very different. Strength transfers into that sport a lot more effectively than it does into pure gi jiu-jitsu. That's what I've found anyway.
No, I think you're absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. 90% of what I did was with gis, and, you know, it's just, when you make that jump to going, you know, straight grappling, wow, complete and total difference. It's so you don't have the handles, you know, there's nothing to grab onto. So yeah, it's unbelievable what it does for strength as well as for cardio. Unbelievable.
Yeah, well, BJJ's an amazing tool in humility. Really, it can teach, especially from personal experience. You can be the biggest, strongest, toughest guy in air quotes around, and then you get on a mat and you put that gi on with someone who's 5 stone lighter than you, and you feel like you could snap them in half, and then within 3 minutes you've been choked out 17 times. And you're like, what happened? How did that happen? They've got all these handles, especially in a gi where you've got collar chokes. They're holding onto your sleeves. Yeah, it's going through your head all the time, and all I'm thinking is, I just want to get this gi off and crush you. But it's part of the game. Training in a gi is one of the most humbling things I've ever done for like a strong, explosive guy, because smaller, well-skilled guys can completely control you. And it's there to mimic real life, because although a gi is a lot stiffer than like normal clothes, if you're in a coat or in a situation where someone's trying to attack you in the street, a lot of the time you're going to have clothes on. So it's really good to have those skills where you know you can just tie someone up long enough that you can defuse the situation and then like leg it and get away, or you can hold them there until help comes, or whatever. It's very applicable to real life.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let me ask you a question. I'm going to get back into strongman. We were talking about strongman for everybody, or everyday strongman, whatever we want to call it. What do you think is the first exercise or implement that the first timer, the newbie, should try to add into their workout program? Because we're talking about all of the benefits of strongman training and how it's applicable and just how beneficial it is. If you got an audience here that's listening and they're thinking, you know what, I don't have Atlas Stones, but what should I go and try out first? What should be the first thing?
Without a doubt, you just get a tractor tyre. Obviously, the tyres we would use would be earth mover tyres. So they're like, the walls are 6 inches thick. They weigh anywhere from 300 to 600 kilos. But just a tractor tyre flips are one of the most functional exercises. They build strength throughout the whole body. So a lot of the tyre companies, when it's sort of ploughing season and stuff, will just give them away. So you can get them for free. Stick it in your backyard, stick it on your driveway, and then you can do tyre flips for reps. If you're working as a team, you can flip the tyre back to and from each other. You can press it to each other. Without a doubt, it's a tyre. From there, it would probably be farmers' walks, because they can be done with heavy kettlebells or all sorts of implements, even buckets, I suppose. But there's kettlebells in every gym these days, so you can do them with kettlebells. But a tyre for sure would be my first port of call.
All right, there you go. There you go, listeners. A tire. You can go to any local trash yard or transfer station and maybe even get yourself a beginner one as well. And the farmers is a fantastic one. I don't think there's a person alive that hasn't come home from the grocery store and tried to take every bag in one trip because they're just loading up their hands. And there you go. Hits everything.
Especially us as men, and then we get halfway towards the door and we regret picking up every bag from the car in one go. You could have done 2 trips.
Yep. You're just thinking, how am I going to open the door now? Because, I can't go for 2 trips. I got to make everything in one.
And the grocery bag is cutting through your hand as well. So, it's one of the...
Yeah. Oh, man. Well,
man, what we like. But back to the tyre just quickly.
Sure.
People will see these tyres and they'll kind of make the mistake of thinking they're tractor tyres. But please believe me, they're not tractor tyres. The tyres that these guys flip on TV are legitimately stupidly heavy. The ones you see these days will be 500 kilos plus per tyre. And they're definitely not a tractor tyre. A tractor tyre will probably weigh anywhere from 100 to 150 to 200 kilos tops. They're a completely different piece of equipment that you see in the strongman competitions.
Yeah, I remember back in the days with I think when Sven was competing at Worlds, they had the giant tire as part of it was in every year it must have been 4 years in a row or more. In the heats, there would be the tire flip. They had to go down. I remember seeing 4 lanes of these ridiculously huge tires.
Yeah,
like you were saying, these guys are like 6.5 feet tall as the short ones, and the tires are just dwarfing them. They're just enormous.
Yeah, they were enormous. The first time, they are. The first time I ever had to, so going back to Sven Carlsen, because they were doing all those events, that they had a 500 kilo tyre in Norway. So the first time I ever had to flip a tyre that heavy was at Norway's Strongest Man. It was terrifying. I managed to do it, but it was ridiculously heavy.
I can't imagine. I could picture it. You're walking up, you get down, you're thinking you're using all these different body parts, very compound, fully functional movement. Go ahead and just flipping it over. But when you get one that's that fast, that's enormous.
There's quite a lot of technique to it, really. Like, people will make the mistake of trying to deadlift the tyre off the floor, which you're never going to do. You have to drive your chest into the tyre, and you drive it forward and upwards rather than lifting it straight up off the floor. That way you don't tear your biceps like a lot of people do when they just try and lift the tyre and then use their arms to lift the last bit. And you can lift a lot more weight more effectively and smoothly. And when you just try and deadlift it up, it's always a bad day when people try and do that.
I can imagine. It's funny that like you said, the amount of weight that people are lifting and the strongmen and all that, it does, make it the window for error gets very small when it comes to that potential injuries when you're lifting that heavy. And it's the same thing. Even if a new person, if I were to go out, find a tire and start to practice, it'll be much smaller, of course, but it's still that small window for error. If I go out and half-ass it with my technique, I'm going to end up laid up for weeks with back problems or tearing a muscle or something like that. So absolutely, it's funny because sometimes you can make the mistake of thinking strongman looks like a very primal and aggressive type of a sport, but there is a tremendous amount of technique with it, especially when you see these guys and lifting these ridiculous amounts of weight.
Oh, it is, and it's baby steps as well. So it's 10 years ago, if you said to the guys, 2018 World's Strongest Man, these are the weights you're going to be using, they would look at you like you're crazy. They were like, we're never going to lift those weights. What are you talking about? But now they're there. They seem normal. It's a bit like when I look back at what I could lift or when I was looking forward, I'm like, I'm never going to be able to do that. But I've managed to get there and do it. And I look back now and I'm like, how did I ever lift that? But it was gradually just little increments, being careful, getting your technique right and gradually building yourself up to getting there. By the time you get there, it's no longer heavy because you can do it. You're there and it doesn't feel heavy anymore. But it's those little baby steps, and hindsight is 2020. If I could go back, I'd probably have trained in the early days a lot differently and taken those steps very gradually and not tried to max everything out all the time and brought in more experienced coaches to help me in the early days with my powerlifting technique, if anything, so I wasn't trying to pull a max deadlift every week and do a max bench press or a max Olympic lift every single week and periodising my training. That way you get a lot stronger than you would if you're just trying to, like people would perceive strongman, lift the heaviest weight all the time. There's still quite a lot of science involved in the training at the top level.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny how rest or your recovery from workouts and your actual rest, meaning like you're sleeping at night, has boomed and become very, very much the most important pieces, or some of the most important pieces of your actual training and your progress. If you're not allowing the body to recuperate, you're not going to progress. You're going to more likely to get injured. And if your body is not resting enough, you're not getting enough sleep at night, then again, you're just not going to be performing optimally. You may, maybe you're not going to get injured, but you're just not going to be firing on all the pistons there.
No, this is where correct nutrition comes in. If you're giving your body the fuel it needs to detoxify itself, get rid of inflammation and build new muscle, then you're going to move forward. Also, there's recovery techniques. Like back when I was competing, I would have 2 soft tissue, deep tissue massages a week, and I would take at least 2 ice baths at home. And people thought I was mad. What are you doing ice baths for? But in my mind, that's the only reason I managed to win at anything. I had to give 100% to be my best, whereas there were guys around me that were more naturally gifted that I would end up beating on competition day because they'd kind of coast through and think that just doing enough was good enough. And I was very aware that wasn't enough, and I had to tick all of the boxes and be very professional about the way I approached the sport if I ever wanted to achieve anything. So that's how I did it, really, and that carried over into the rest of my life. How I approach family life, how I approach work, business, how I coach people. It all manifested into that, and that's where like my philosophy, the philosophy I live my life by, stand up and fight, came from. Really, it was about that. Just giving 100% all the time.
Yeah, and stand up and fight. You want to just go into it a little bit as your philosophy? We'll call it your philosophy in life. Just a little bit of background on it.
It's more about when I was training that I had to be accountable to myself, and I knew, like I just explained then, I had to give everything I had, from deep in the pit of my soul, if I wanted to win against the guys I was competing against. I was very aware of what I faced when I went abroad to compete, because the guys would weigh in the day before, and they were huge guys. Like we had to weigh in at 105 kilos, so 230 whatever pounds. But that they would do what fighters do. So because we weighed in the day before when we abroad, they would cut water, drop a huge amount of weight. They would weigh more like they would be 15 pounds heavier the next day, 16 pounds heavier when we competed the next day. So I knew I had to give everything. So stand up and fight came from, I didn't want to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, but I did anyway. I didn't want to eat that meal, but I did anyway. I didn't want to have that ice bath, but I did anyway. I didn't want to do that extra rep, but I did anyway. You know, it comes little things as well, like keeping your environment tidy around you. Don't think that everything's everyone else's job. If there's rubbish on the floor or there's some mess somewhere, you tidy it up. It's not everyone else's job. You need to do that. It's the little tiny things that make the difference and that make you a champion, is getting all the little things right first, the little habits, and they form into a strong, resilient personality that can help you and help everyone else.
No arguing with that. There is no arguing with that, Scott. Oh, man. All right. I don't want to take up actually, I kind of do want to take up more of your time, but I don't want to take up more of your time. I'm fine.
I'm enjoying the conversation, really. So I mentioned this the other day, sort of going back to that. Yeah, there's the All Blacks rugby team. Everybody, even though you're not really into your rugby in the States, everyone knows who the All Blacks are. So there's a book called Legacy that's about the All Blacks and their mindset and why they are they're the most successful sporting team in history, bar none, statistically. And there's this little thing they called sweeping the shed floors. So in rugby, they call changing rooms the sheds. So most professional rugby players would be after the gym. Like rugby, everyone's big on drinking, so they'd be off to get pissed up after the game, legging it out the changing rooms, leaving it like a shambles. The All Blacks would always clean their changing room from top to bottom, put all of the mud, all of the mess in the bin, and leave it cleaner than when they got there. And that's what their coaches teach them. It's the little tasks and the little skills that count. So that carries onto the rugby field, where the tiny little skills, the way you pass the ball, the position you hold, the way you hold yourself as a person, that's what makes them such an effective team. And that's kind of how I try to look at trying to improve myself as a person. Like, rather than having to have coaches and people around me, I want to be my own worst critic. I need to be accountable to myself all the time. And that keeps me on the straight and narrow, really, because I'm from a Celtic Irish background, so I've got Scottish parents and Irish parents. So I've got the fire inside of me, and that helps control that. It helps channel it into like a winning, positive attitude rather than leading me down the wrong path.
You know, and I think that positive attitude is just such a huge part of being a successful person, successful in life. And that doesn't mean anything. When I say successful, I don't mean successful in terms of money, business, and that type of thing, or possessions. I mean, surrounding yourself with positive people, like-minded in the sense of they're looking to achieve positive things as well. You know, if you're looking to live a long, healthy, happy lifestyle, you're not necessarily going to want to hang out with a bunch of people that are smoking cigarettes and drinking and, every single night and partying all the time. You're going to want to surround yourself with positive people, because one of the things I've kind of been picking up on over the years is it takes a village. You know that old saying, it takes a village to accomplish whatever. Yeah. It definitely helps when you've got somebody to bounce ideas off of, to help motivate you, push you, training partners, just, family members, whatever it may be. As long as they're in there with that positive attitude, the more people that you have in your corner, the better and easier it's going to be for you. And then you can return the favor as well, because somebody's going to need you, and it does take that village.
Oh, absolutely. I think the way I look at it is like having a brotherhood of like-minded people. So you need to surround yourself. If you've got any bad wood, you need to cut it out, and you don't need to have those people. You don't need to completely cut them out of your life, but they don't need to be part of your everyday social structure. So you need a brotherhood of like-minded, motivated people. That can be men or women. Like, the brotherhood doesn't just have to be men. But also with the word motivation, it's kind of it can be a little bit worrying to me, because motivation can run out. There's a point where you're not going to be motivated, and what are you going to do when you get those days when you're simply you feel like crap, and you just don't want to do the tasks that are in front of you that day. That's where discipline comes in. That's where stand up and fight comes in. That's where those feelings just don't get a say. I need to get these 5 things out of the way today, and they're happening no matter what. I'm going to eat correctly. I'm going to get my training in. I've got to send these emails. I've got to do this. I've got to get out of bed early. You get those things done, whether you're motivated or not. And that's where stand up and fight and where discipline sort of takes over and supersedes motivation, as it were. Like, everyone talks about being motivated, but I kind of feel that being accountable to yourself and being self-disciplined is far more important than motivation. I don't know how you feel about that.
No, I absolutely can see where you're coming from. Where if you don't have that, I love that term, discipline. If you don't have that discipline to get up early in the morning, it doesn't matter if you're going to go work out with 2 or 3 buddies. If you don't get to the gym, it doesn't matter that you have 2 great people there to motivate you. It's that village aspect of having people there to help. That's help. That's assistance to me. That's kind of like supplements in your overall diet. You have to have the discipline. You have to have that basic want and desire to do it. It's like that's like your basic nutrition. If you're not eating well, you don't have that discipline, it doesn't matter what's going to happen. So I absolutely can see that, and I love the tying to stand up and fight. That's pretty damn cool approach or mantra, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, also, please don't think that kind of I, from a young age, like from a kid, have been like this. Like I mentioned earlier, like I come from a Scots-Irish family, so they're all heavy drinkers. So from Friday night, well, actually all week they're drinking, but from Friday night till Sunday afternoon, they're plastered, they're in the pub. And that's how I was brought up. I was brought up in pubs, at parties, around drink, around violence. And it kind of, it made me realise that that's kind of not what I wanted. Now, luckily I had my mum's parents, were different to that. My granddad was in the military. He come from a long history of a military family. He was a lifeguard for the Queen, and then he was in the prison service. So I kind of had a different aspect to look at, and I kind of knew that if you go down this path, no matter how successful you are, no matter how much money you earn, you're going nowhere. It's all going to end up in the landlord's pocket, in the bar owner's pocket, and it's going to damage your health. You're going to turn around when you're 65 years old, and you're going to have a lot of what ifs. What if I did this? What if I did that? I was a good athlete at school. I could have done this. Yeah, but you didn't do it. So it kind of the point I'm trying to make is that your circumstances that you're in now don't need to dictate the rest of your life. Every day you get up is a new day. You can make the decision to make small changes to improve your circumstances, improve your life, and they only need to be a little bit at a time, and take yourself down a path that, when it's all said and done, and you're put back into the earth, you've made the most of it. You've made it worthwhile.
No, that makes perfect sense, and it's kind of ironic that when you're saying about like you make the small changes to have the bigger long-term impact. It's interesting because when I was trying to come up with a name for the podcast, I came up with Dog Life Radio, because the tie there, it's, I love dogs, and it's got nothing to do with that, but I was watching them. I have a couple of dogs, and the dogs really live in the moment. They really don't carry a grudge for the most part, and they're just really happy to be alive, running around, just playing, living. They love it. People generally aren't like that. Sometimes we cling to things, and we pine over moments, and it's these moments, these small moments in a person's day. If we change just one small moment in a person's day, we can make these big changes. We can make these big, huge, world-changing impacts. And what I mean by that is one moment can change a person's day. So if you have this random act of kindness on a person's day, and after we hang up the phone here, it can change that person's day. And that one day can change a person's life, because we've all had those where we, that one day in our life where we made a massive change that impacted our entire life. And that one life, one person can change the world. We could rattle off, 50, 100 different people that can make changes to the world. So it's all coming down to these little tiny moments where, you're making these small changes, and it can impact somebody in a way that you have no idea about how much of an impact you're leaving with them. And, maybe even what you're doing, what you're saying right now, somebody's going to listen and make a small change, and it's going to change their life and they're going to end up making a huge impact, at least in their corner of the world, if not more.
Oh, I totally agree. I think something that could put it in perspective for people is you might have this grand vision. Like I've got this vision of where I want to be, what I want Focus Performance to be, how I can make it like influence and help other people. But you need to concentrate on the day ahead. So you need to win every single day moving forward to get to that goal. You can't just concentrate and get overwhelmed by the big picture. You need to go, so what do I need to like get where I want to be? So I need to start training. I need to do this. I need to educate myself in something. Now each day, just work towards getting those little tasks ticked off the board. I think Andy Priscilla calls it his power list. I think Jocko Willink calls it his critical tasks. You've got all these little just each day win that day, whether it's 3, 5, 8 or 10 tasks. Just win that day every single day, and then you're moving forward towards that goal. And it's not so overwhelming then, because you've won one day, you've won 2, then you've won a week, and the goal, the ultimate goal is just getting closer and closer without breaking you down, and where you become demoralised because you think, how am I ever going to get there? That's like the moon. I'm never going to reach there. But if each day you're getting one brick higher, eventually you'll make it, won't you?
Absolutely. Yeah. Scott, how old are you?
41 now.
41. Okay. The reason I ask is it's funny because not that I've spoken to people of all different ages and walks of life, and I think people have value that at all points. But it's funny how as you get a little older, you just have more opportunities to learn just based on sheer time. And it's funny the perspectives. I was gonna, when I look at your pictures and stuff from Instagram, you couldn't tell you're a young-looking man and definitely in really good shape, but you could tell the wisdom that you're bringing with you.
Yeah, that comes from I call it street knowledge. So I'll definitely be educated in the school of hard knocks, and I've had to learn everything the hard way. But this is when people now, I'll say, learn from other people's mistakes. There are people out there that have made all the mistakes and are doing things better than you are. So look at where they've gone wrong and don't make the same mistakes they've done just because you've got to do it yourself. I've been very guilty of that in my younger life, whereas now I'll take a much more objective view on things and trying to gather a blueprint and information from all experienced people around me that are very skilled at what they do, and go, okay, so they've made this mistake, made that mistake. I don't need to do that. There's a blueprint for me to follow here. I hope that's what I can kind of give to people. Like I said, I didn't come from a privileged background, and I've had to learn everything the hard way. And it's very important to realise that you need to kind of, information is so easily available these days, which it wasn't in the past, that there's very little need to have to bang your head against a brick wall continuously. You can use the blueprint that's laid out there and sort of soften your course through life a little bit, really.
Absolutely. It's like as simple as diets, or how to operate a standard vehicle. If you want to learn how to drive, Google it. There's tons of information out there to be able to look at it, and then you can kind of take it and make it your own and through your own experiences. Absolutely agree with it. I mean, there's no reason not to try, and there's definitely, like you said, if you don't have that group of people around you, there's very easy ways to find out information about pretty much anything there is. No,
yeah, absolutely. I mean, back to physical activity as well. It's kind of, the social media age has changed it very much. Physical activity, training in general, genuinely kind of saved my life. It gave me a focus, a purpose that then carried on and flowed through into me wanting to expand my mind and educate myself and sort of own my own business and coach people. And that all stemmed from starting to train. Whereas I feel a lot of people have lost the pure essence of it these days. It's all about an Instagram photo, all about this, all about that. It's not about why are you actually exercising? Are you doing it because you enjoy it? I didn't do it because I ever wanted to look a certain way, really. It was more that it challenged me, continuously challenged me, and it made me grow as a person. The aesthetics come as a kind of a byproduct, and if people approach training more from that perspective, they'll find that they'll get a lot more out of it. Like, to me, it's almost like meditation when I'm in the gym. I think even Arnie said that in the old days, but that comes from being kind of at one with why you are training and why you do it, and accepting that rather than it just being for purely aesthetic reasons.
Yeah, and I think in recent months, people have used that term functional fitness and whatnot, and like I think of it in terms of I want to be able to run around, I want to be able to play with my kids, I want to be able to do those types of activities and not have to worry about my back, my legs, my knees, something to that effect. Like you're saying, if it comes with getting a body that's looking a certain way, that's great. But the overall goal is for the enjoyment of life, and that's the more important piece.
Oh, absolutely as well. That is it, about enjoying life, being a strong, functional human being. And I think with training as well, everyone's looking for the magic bullet, the magic program, the magic supplement, this, that, and the other. And when you go in the gym, you spot straight away what the problem is. Like, people that are novices are using exercises that someone who's been training for 20 years and they're trying to put the finishing touches to like a physique where they're just about to get onto a bodybuilding stage would use. People just need to go back to basics and get in there and actually train, put their phones down and give 110% every time they're in the gym. And then they will get so much more from that physical activity than kind of being like suckered into this training program that this coach has given them off of Instagram, who's just trying to put a spin on something so that he can sell that program. Whereas you go back to it, you do your basic lifts, you get some kettlebells out, you get some strongman equipment out, you've got a barbell so you can do your 3 basic powerlifting movements. You don't need much more than that. And just give 110% every time. Walk out of that gym like knowing you've left everything in there. Then you get the results that you want. So this is how I still keep results into my 40s and stay strong and fit and keep a good physique, is because I'm there for a purpose. I'm there to train.
Yep. I love seeing people walk around with phones, with newspapers, that type of a thing when they're at the gym. And it's the sheer giveaway of, okay, now I know why they're here versus why some other folks were there. I definitely, whenever I used to go to I go to the gym and it's heads down, just go and do my work, and I viewed it as I'm here to do some work. Absolutely.
I mean, CrossFit has its good points and bad points, but its overwhelmingly redeeming good point is that it's got the masses exercising correctly and hard as well, and that community feel it has to it is massive as well, because that helps people grow and feel comfortable with exercising. Like my whole family does CrossFit apart from me. I go down the CrossFit gym with my brother and my sisters and stuff, and join in and do my brother's Olympic lifting classes and help out with strongman coaching down there, and they've got a really good community. But my brother was a boxer when he was younger, but he wouldn't have necessarily ever got into sort of gym training. My sister definitely wouldn't have either, or her husband. But CrossFit has kind of given them that gateway and that community to get into exercise. And it's helped a lot of people, and it's stripped back that globo gym mentality where you've got all these shiny machines and gone back to basics, which I think is a really positive influence, I think, on the exercise community as a whole.
Absolutely. I remember when I first started going into gyms, all of the machines. Machines have their place in certain spheres or walks of the fitness industry and, cultures and whatnot, finishing off certain points, warming up, whatever, rehabilitation. But for the most part, I'm not a huge fan of machines when you're trying to exercise for full body overall fitness. So yeah, you don't see that type of stuff in your CrossFit boxes and whatnot. And they're actually pulling in a lot more strongman exercises now. a couple of friends of mine actually own a CrossFit gym not too far from me, and I saw they were doing some yoke training with some of their clients.
Yeah, they do. I think there's a guy in Canada called Julian Panu. He's not actually a CrossFit affiliate, but because he calls the CrossFit headquarters the Death Star, I think. Don't think he likes them very much. But he has a lot of really games level athletes coming out of his gym. And he's a strongman, and they use a lot of strongman exercises and movements to help improve their athletes. A massive problem with CrossFitters up until a few years ago was really bad shoulder instability, because they were getting into advanced movements like kipping on pull-ups before their body was anywhere near strong enough to do it. So there were overhead yoke carries and sandbag carries and just other stuff they're doing, like using the log and Viking press and stuff, has really helped round up their programming and their training protocols, and he's leading the way with that over there at the moment. I think it's called StrongFit, and his name's Julian Panu.
That's pretty cool. You can see, I mean, even just as you start to describe it and talk about it, in your head you can see the benefits of pulling in those different types of exercises. It seems, I don't want to say it seems pretty obvious. It's obvious because it got pointed out to me, but absolutely, there's a lot of different similarities. I mean, a lot of similarities on the different lifts and exercises and the WODs that they're doing in CrossFit as compared to some of the things that are trying and being accomplished in strongman too, with the total body fitness piece. You're looking at a great deal of compound movements. It's really about performance as opposed to aesthetics, that type of a thing.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, strongman. There's got a lot to be said for it. I mean, before there was CrossFit, there was strongman, and kind of when CrossFit first started sort of rearing its head, we were kind of a bit, aren't they stealing a lot of our ideas? So that was kind of the way we thought about CrossFit to start with. And they're not lifting very heavy weight, but then it kind of the games that athletes now are absolute freaks of nature. You can't do anything but admire the games athletes. Amazing.
Oh yeah.
But strongman had that community feel to it as well. Back when I was competing, and it still does now. Like the competitions abroad, you'd have people from 10 different countries, but it was like you're all brothers. Very big, large, excitable brothers that then didn't drink very much until after the competition, and then got very drunk after the competition. So you can imagine what that was like, a load of ginormous, happy, crazy people running around. But no, it was a great community, a bit like CrossFit was, or is, should I say. So there's a lot to be said for that.
Absolutely. It gets back to that surrounding yourself with like-minded people. I mean, when you're at that point, you're not only in your like if you're at a gym and you're training, maybe there's a couple of people that are in that similar mind frame of getting there to those levels. But then when you're actually at the competition, everybody is at that same high standard, that same high level. So you can pretty much guarantee that most people they're all there with that same mindset, that same killer performance, discipline, and drive. And then afterwards, the pressure is somewhat off. The competition's over. Then you can get a chance to let loose a little bit with these people who are got to be pretty similar to you in many ways.
Yeah, no, it was a great experience. It was a very maturing experience as well, because a lot of the countries where strongman's huge in Eastern Europe, kind of when you go there, you've still got all of the old Russian checkpoints and stuff, that you'd have to go through. And it was very much the people that would run the competitions definitely weren't policemen or politically correct people. They were kind of the underbelly of it was kind of the underbelly of the country. So you got to see these countries in a very real way that wouldn't be safe to do if you weren't with these people. So it was a very maturing experience for me. I got to see a lot of things, do a lot of things, and experience these countries like Ukraine, Estonia, Latvia, and even the Scandinavian countries. That you would never see the countries in that way, or know that's how they operated if you were just a tourist. So it was an amazing time in my life, really. I'm glad I got to experience it.
That's wild. So can you give us I don't know, a funny or particularly scary part, a story part of one of those trips?
Well, I don't know. Well, in Estonia, I think was the main one. Where you're going into a club, and it turns out the two guys that are running the competition are actually Estonian mafia, and then you're sitting down around a table with people, and then suddenly you notice like someone's got a gun in their waist, in the waist of their trousers, like little things like that. It's that was a bit scary.
I can. Oh my God.
But it's also like in England and America, we're kind of similar in some ways. You'd go there as well, and after you'd be going into like a plunge pool or the massive sauna with all these strong men, but everyone's butt naked. And it's kind of, you wouldn't, like, there's not necessarily like, you wouldn't see that in Great Britain. It's not like that. And it takes some adjusting as well, but it's, that's a bit weird as well. You have all these giant men that are winding each other up, making like pretend homosexual comments to scare the other person next to them. It was, that's all a bit scary as well. It was, like I say, it was definitely a maturing experience, 100%.
Okay, I could see that. That's a couple of good stories there, man. Oh man. Hey, Scott, I want to ask you. I want to give you a couple of seconds. I want to let you promote your site and your Instagram. Your Instagram, I know it's Scott Reid 105. I want to give you the chance to plug into your social media for it before we wrap things up here.
Okay, well, Instagram on Scott Reid 105. The reason it's 105 is because that was my weight class. So every name was taken, so I just went with 105. It kind of made sense. Twitter is the same. I am on Facebook, but I'm not really very active on there. It's more because we're going to start a group, stand-up and fight group, in the next few months on Facebook. And we're going to do a lot more content on there in the future. But I'm mainly on Instagram and Twitter. My website is focusperformance.co.uk. And like you mentioned earlier, Rossi, the blog there is hugely educational. And the company's kind of in a big transition period right now where we're just really trying to promote that positive, forward-thinking attitude where people can use exercise to improve sort of every facet of their life, really, whether it be in martial arts, boxing, jiu-jitsu, BJJ, or you've got your strength training as well, like CrossFitters, Spartan racers, powerlifters. We're just trying to get everyone who's serious about training into a community of like-minded people that want to improve and move forward.
Awesome. And that's focusperformance.co.uk.
Yeah, and sort of in fall this year, I've kind of almost finished a book, which is funny enough called Stand Up and Fight. That's
there you go.
That's going to be I know. That's kind of based around a few of my experiences, mindset, training, recovery, and nutrition, and a little bit of sort of philosophy mixed in. It's not going to be hugely long, but it will definitely be helpful to people out there and give a real world, non-commercial view on how kind of a positive attitude and educating yourself daily and physical movement and exercise can help and improve your life.
Oh, that sounds awesome. We're going to have to stay in touch so I can help promote it, and maybe we'll have you back on when that gets published. Fantastic stuff. Yeah, Scott, I got to say thank you. I got to say thank you so much for the conversation. This has been an absolute pleasure.
No, I've really enjoyed it. It's been great talking to you. A really easy conversation. Thank you very much.
All right. And that's a wrap. Awesome conversation with Scott. He's obviously the kind of guy that we're going to have back on the show because we could have gone for at least another hour or so. I'll definitely make sure my voice is up to it when I get the chance to connect back with Scott. Because I think he's just a wealth of information on a variety of topics and a hell of a fun guy. So please remember to check out his website, focusperformance.co.uk. Check him out on Instagram as well at ScottReid105. There's links to his website there as well. Very, very cool stuff. Thank you very much, Scott, and thank you all for listening.
All right, gang. Gentle reminder here, if you want to get 15% off of any of the top-of-the-line products at Evans Country Clean, remember to use the promo code DOGLIFE15 for 15% off of any of their hypoallergenic top-of-the-line products. They have a whole line of scents just for men, so please check them out at evanscountryclean.com.